and welcome to episode 5 of my polymer clay series. Now in today's episode I'm going to be showing you how to make a sliced bloomer loaf, and I'm making mine to go on the stone breadboard in my doll's house kitchen. So I'm going to start by showing you what materials you're going to need. So we're just going to be using 2 coloured clays for the basic bread mixture, and I've got here a white, and that's a solid white rather than a translucent white, and I'm using a champagne, but you could also use any sort of beige or ecru colour. I've also got here an old baking tray with a piece of baking parchment on it, and obviously you don't want to use one of the trays that you use for baking on, so just use something that you keep for this purpose only. I've also got in my little box here some blades for actually cutting the polymer clay, and a large sewing needle which we're actually going to be using to create texture with. Over here I've got some corn flour, again to create some texture in the bread, and some plain flour as well. I'm going to be working on a ceramic tile, and here I've got some pastels which we'll be using to colour the bread, and just a piece of paper to create some pastel dust which we'll then be brushing onto our bloomer. Okay, so let's get started. So begin by cutting yourself equal amounts of the champagne and the white, or whatever sort of beige colour you're using, and then you just want to start by warming them up in your hands. And we're going to be mixing these two together. So once we've got them warm enough, we'll roll them together and then shape them into a ball. So when you've got both pieces nice and soft, roll it into a sausage. That, same with the other piece. And then put them together and begin to roll. And you can roll and fold and roll again, and then you can shape it back into a ball, but just keep going until you've got a nice solid colour piece. You don't want any marbling in it. Once you've completely blended the two pieces, cut a piece off, and you want to roll it into a ball of about 15mm in diameter, or 5/8 of an inch. Then flatten the ball out on your tile. And we're going to add a tiny amount of corn flour. And you really do just want a small amount, so just a tiny little pinch like that, and sprinkle it on. If you add too much, you'll find that the clay becomes really dry and will crack. And then fold that in again, and again begin to roll it. You can dab that up as well like that. And you can just see the texture there in that ball of clay. So we're now going to shape this into a bloomer shape. So pop it back down on your tile, just cleaning off those bits on there, and then sort of shape it into a bit of a sausage, and then sort of flatten it down. Until you've got a sort of nice bloomer shape. And I suppose you want it to be about 1 inch long, which in real life would be about 1 foot long, which I think is about the size of a bloomer loaf. So just sort of shape until you're happy with it. You don't want any ridges in it, and try as well not to get any sort of fingerprints in it. So what we're going to do now is create some pastel chalk dust to actually colour our bloomer with. So the colours we're going to use is a sort of dark red, or sort of rusty colour, a brown, and a yellow ochre. And you just want a tiny amount of the red, so just a few little sweeps like that. A little bit more of the brown, and then a bit of the yellow. And you just want to create a little bit of dust from each of those colours, so just sort of swirl it on your paper like that. I'm then just going to pop those out of the way. So I've got here a nice soft brush, and I just want to create a mixture from all three colours. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of the red, a bit of the brown, and some of the yellow, and just sort of start mixing them into a separate pile. A tiny bit of that red. And keep going until you've got a nice sort of bread colour mixed on your paper, like that. I like adding quite a bit of the yellow. I think that creates a nice colour. And then bring your bread back in. And just lightly brush that on. And you're just dabbing it on. You don't want to put too much in one place. Let me move in a little bit there. Keep mixing in the colours. You can bring in some more pastel dust if you need to. And this is why you need a soft brush, because you don't want to, dent the Fimo or the clay. Go all the way around. And mine is actually sticking to the tile, but I quite like that when I'm working on it, because then it just holds it in place for you. And just build it up slowly like this as well. You don't want to put too much on, because once it's on then you can't get it off. Okay, so I'm actually running out of dust, so I'm going to create a little bit more and then I'll put another layer on. Okay, so I'm just mixing up a bit more here. I'm going to dab on again. And I've seen people use acrylic paint to colour the clay, but I always think the pastel is a little bit more subtle. I think with the paint, unless you're very good at doing it, you can sort of create lines and it just looks a little bit unreal. And again, one thing I'm sort of very good at doing is going over the top with things and not knowing when to stop. I'm just pulling a little paintbrush hair out there. So sort of stop and have a look at it and see what you think of the colour. Let me show you that close up. I think that's quite a nice bread colour now. And then if you wanted it to look a little bit burnt, you could add a little bit more of the brown. In fact, I think I'm just going to get a little bit more of the brown and yellow. Just dot a little bit more on. Make it look like a nice sort of freshly baked loaf. Yeah, I'm quite happy with the colouring now. So what I'm going to do now is actually add some texture to the outside of the loaf. And I'm going to use this piece of polystyrene, and I think this just came in some packaging. I can't remember now where I got it from, but it's just got a nice sort of bready texture on it. And I'm just going to go over really gently. Now, if you haven't got anything like this, you could use some wadding, like patchwork wadding or stuffing, something like that. You can use tin foil, but be careful with that because that will give you, quite a hard texture. You could use a piece of fabric, piece of kitchen towel, anything that you can create a little bit of a ruffle on, and then just press that into the loaf. And as I'm doing it as well, I'm sort of reshaping it. You don't want to flatten it down too much. And that's still sort of sticking in place there. And again, it's just really subtle. If you've got any finger marks in there, you can try and sort of dot those out. And the other thing you can do as well is add some poppy seeds in. as well as the corn flour, and that would give you a sort of seeded loaf. And it's a really good idea as well if you're unsure what shape to use or what texture or colour, just have a look on Google Images and search for fresh bread or freshly baked bread or something like that, and you'll see bread and loaves and rolls and baguettes in all shapes, sizes and colours. So use that as your inspiration. But this will give you the sort of basic technique for making bread. And it really is one of my favourite things to make from clay. Now I'm only doing this one today because this is one I need in particular for my kitchen, but I will be doing the cheese and bread stall, don't forget. So we'll be doing lots of different shaped loaves, and I'll be showing you how to make some trays as well to put them in. Okay, so I think that's enough texture in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually put some slits into the bread. So I'm just going to use the end of a cocktail stick and go across diagonally like that. And just press into the clay. And I'm going to do that all the way along. I'll probably do sort of 3 or 4 slits. One there as well. And then if you've flattened it down a little bit, you can take again your texturizer and just push it in at the sides to get it back into that nice loaf shape. So I just want to show you that from the top there so you can see the full thing. And now what I'm going to do is bring in the needle, and this is quite a large one, and we're going to use this to create some texture in those slits. And all you want to do is make some little pinpricks like that, and then as if you're sort of stirring the tip around. And I saw this online many years ago, and I just thought it was one of the best techniques for creating that lovely sort of bready texture. So just like that into each of those slits. So you're jabbing and then like giving it a little stir. Just very gently. In each of the slits like that, and then you can leave your loaf like that if you wish and put that in the oven to bake, and I'll talk about baking times in a moment. But if you want to cut some slices, as I'm going to do, so I can create a nice display on my breadboard, bring back in your tissue blade and you're just going to cut down really carefully, trying not to sort of flatten the loaf. Like that. So cut down and then pull that away from the loaf. And we're going to create some textures in those as well. I'm going to probably do 3 slices here that I can then have laid on my board. Again, pull that away. You can slide the blade underneath it if you need to lift it up like that. And then one more. And don't cut them too thick. Like that. And then bring back in your needle, and we're going to start again by creating that texture actually in the cut loaf. So again, just jabbing, stirring. Creating that really nice texture. And just take your time with it. This really is where the detail comes in that makes it, you know, look realistic. So again, if you've sort of misshaped the actual loaf while you're doing that, use your texturizer just to push that back into shape. Like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing again with my slices. So Once you start, they'll sort of stick down onto the tile, so you can do it without sort of holding on to it. And you only need to do one side of these slices. So then, just as a little final touch, I like to sprinkle with a little bit of plain flour. So again, just a tiny pinch, hold it sort of quite high up and just sprinkle it on. Like that. And I like to do that before baking because then it gives a really nice texture. And if you've put too much on, you can just take your brush and just sort of dab it in like that, brush a bit off. Okay, so these are now ready to bake. So to lift them off your tile, just very carefully slide the tissue blade underneath. Again, you don't want to misshape the loaf. Like that, and then carefully lift that onto your tray. And the same with your slices. Okay, so the baking instructions on the packet say to bake at 110 centigrade or 230 Fahrenheit for a maximum of 30 minutes. Now 30 minutes is a long time, and that's probably for, you know, larger models and things, but for small pieces like this, I just like to do it for about 10 minutes maximum, and then you leave them to dry and they set nice and hard. So I'm going to put this in the oven now for 10 minutes. Okay, so my bread baked for exactly 10 minutes, and it's now been cooling for 10 minutes, and that is now cool. And when you're sort of baking a larger piece with finer pieces, you want to make sure you're putting it in, or you're not putting it in the oven too long, so that your finer pieces are going to start to burn. And you can normally smell that when it starts to happen, and the edges of your pieces will go sort of really brown, especially when you're using a lighter clay. So if you have got smaller pieces like this mixed in with larger pieces, then perhaps after sort of 8 to 10 minutes, have a look at them, and you could even take the finer slices out and then leave that for a bit longer if it still feels a bit soft. But 10 minutes was fine for all of those pieces. And like I say, even if the sort of larger pieces feel a little bit soft when they come out of the oven, as they cool they will harden up, and you can see that's nice and hard now. So I'm really pleased with these. So what I'm going to do now is display them on my breadboard and attach that to my kitchen work surface. Okay, so I'm attaching my bread to this breadboard, which is actually a piece of slate which I cut in half, and I've got the other half of it on there as well with the coffee cups ready. And I'm actually going to glue the bread to the slate using my Gorilla Wood glue, and I find that that works really well, or again you could use PVA. So I'm going to start with the loaf and just put a bit of glue onto the bottom there, and then sit that at a bit of an angle. And have a think as well where it's actually going to be positioned in your kitchen, because you want to see this lovely sort of cut area when you're looking into the kitchen. Press that into place. And then I'm going to do the slices as well. So I'll start with the smaller one there and then have them sort of piled up. On there like that. You can use your tacky wax for this if you don't want to sort of permanently glue it into place. And you can also, you know, remove some of the slices. You don't have to have all of the slices on display. Somebody might have fancied a slice of bread and butter. Just pop that one there like that. So the glue will take a little bit longer to dry because you're not sort of gluing anything to wood, but it will eventually set, so just get it into position, give it a press, and then I want to glue the knife into place at the back there. So I'm just actually going to put a bit onto the handle and then onto the end of that blade. And lay that down at the back there. Again, give that a press. And then I'm also going to glue my breadboard to my work surface. And again, this is all optional. You might just want to leave it all loose, or you might want to use your tacky wax to just sort of temporarily put it all in place. And there we are, one sliced bloomer loaf. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you'll have a go at making your own bread. If you do, I'd love to see what you bake, so do share your photos in my group Little Bits and Pieces by You. Okay, so I'm going to go and put this unit back into place in the kitchen, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, bye!